this space that we all kind of semi-inhabit with from different sides with different feet, etc., is essentially that while some people can be new atheists and have a great life, and Richard Dawkins is clearly someone, you know, who enjoys his life and is not void of meaning and blah, 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 blah. Human beings are a religious animal. And in the absence of actual religion,
I wouldn't say human beings are a religious animal. You could say that we tend to look at things in a religious way because, evolutionarily speaking, religion has had a function for holding societies together and bonding people to behind a common goal, right? That doesn't mean we're actually religious animals. It means like we're groupish animals. We like to form into groups and become tribal about other groups, right? That's obvious.
We will begin to seek others, which is one of the reasons, to put it crudely, our society is so fucked up right now. The death of God is why we are where we are, and it's all your and Richard's fault.
Yeah, obviously I've talked about Nietzsche's Death of God a million times. Of it, that to oversimplify in a nutshell the idea that with the secularization of culture during the Enlightenment, that led to people not placing God as the main thing in their lives, so that's going to lead to people worshiping other things instead. And as many people are doing that today, especially way too online, people are worshiping politics and getting way too tribal about politics, which people like these guys argue means that it's better to just be religious. But obviously not everyone has to be religious, which they themselves said, like Richard Dawkins can be a happy religious person, but that doesn't mean that Richard Dawkins is naturally a religious person. He's rejecting his natural religious instincts, right? And that's what Alex is about to get into. But they do have a point that, like I was saying, that Sam Harris and Richard Dawkins, they go too hard on religion. I used to be one, like I've said many times, a militant atheist, but then I learned about like the evolutionary function of religion, and you know that many people there are good religious people and bad religious people, like there are in any group of people, regardless of how you define them.
Maybe it is. I mean, look, there's some compelling evidence to show that.
Oh, sorry, I'm going to go back a sec.
Religious.
The death of God is why we are where we are, and it's all your and Richard's fault.
Yeah, maybe it is. I mean, look, there's some compelling evidence to show that religious communities, like I saw a study recently that religious communities coped better with the COVID pandemic, for example. And there's evidence to show that people feel more.
We can assume that's true for the sake of argument, but I mean, there's probably a lot of variation in terms of whether religious or non-religious communities coped better with the pandemic. Although it would make sense if you think about why it might be, because religious groups tend to be more cooperative and bonded together, like we were saying, right? But I guess it obviously depends on the type of religion in the church, because there are people who are like lapsed Christians of all different kinds, and maybe they're not as much of a tight-knit group in their church as they are in other churches. But that is a fair point, I'd say.
Fulfilled. I think even like in their sex life, if they're religious, you know, there's so many reasons why.
I think that's actually heavily debated too. I've heard atheists say that atheists have better sex lives, and I've heard religious people say that religious people have better sex life. I don't know. It seems to me like atheists or agnostics would have less moral qualms about doing like kinky and fun and experimental stuff than religious people, stereotypically speaking. But I mean, if your wife is okay with that and no one tells anyone, are you going against your religion? Who knows? I think that's an interesting topic to get into, perhaps.
Why there might be utility in being religious, and I suppose my answer to that is to say, well, of course, because if I don't believe that this is true, I have to account for why it exists. It wouldn't make, if you've got this thing that isn't true and is
if I don't have to believe that it's true, then I don't have to account for why it exists. So yeah, that's an interesting point for the different ways in which religious and non-religious people are approaching this. So we have to explain why God is there if you believe in God, but you don't have to explain why it's there if you're not an atheist. But I mean, obviously, in fact, many atheists try to explain why God is not there and it's arguable, it's debatable about whether you can prove a negative and whether you can actually disprove God, and whether you not being able to disprove God hypothetically means that means God is actually real. That's not necessarily a good argument either. But anyway, I'm kind of getting ahead of myself here.
Ambiguously harmful for society, then why the hell would it evolve? Of course, it must be doing something, right? And of course, the corollary of that is that by murdering God, we sort of, the streets are covered in blood, and people are sort of trying to.
That's a very eloquent oversimplification. We murdered God, and now the streets are covered in blood because it's led to all of this unrestrained tribalism that has gone all chaotic, which is something like what Jordan Peterson would say, which is definitely an oversimplification, but we don't need to focus on that.
Erect false idols out of the DNA, and they end up with, as you would probably see it, wokeism, as some would see it, Christian nationalism.
Yeah, you could see it. You could see it either way, from a right wing or a left wing perspective. Like, obviously, right wingers are saying that like wokeness is a religion, and then or like right wing nationalists, obviously they tend to be like open Christian conservatives, so they literally are religiously tribal against the woke in that way, even though there obviously are quote unquote woke Christians who hate the Christian right wing traditional Christian nationalists, pieces of shit like J.D. Vance, as the new Pope himself has pointed out. But anyway, let's continue here.
Sorry, not Christian nationalism, because that's a form of religion, but nationalism, let's say secular nationalism.
Oh, that's why he separated that. So they're both forms of secularism. I get it.
And that's true. Yeah, of course that's the case. Human beings seek transcendence. They seek the divine. My position is that I just don't think this is true. And I don't have much more to say on this apart from asking,